The wagon rolled away before Winnie Dorsey finished reading the notice nailed beside the gate. Household rations end Sunday. Seasonal families to vacat. Kitchen operations reduced to essential wage hands. The driver did not look back. His wheels cut 2 dark lines through the thin November snow, then disappeared between the cottonwoods toward Buena Vista, taking Winnie's trunk, her flour-dusted satchel, and any easy road away with him. She stood alone at Slate Hollow Ranch on Tuesday, November 17th, 1891, with the upper Arkansas Valley, cold pressing through her coat, and a notice that seemed to have been written before anyone knew she was coming. "Miss Dorsey?" The man approaching from the ranch house carried a cane he did not need for walking. He was lean, clean-shaven, and dressed more carefully than the men moving around the distant cattle pens. Hugh Vickery, executor of the Harwood estate. Winnie glanced once more at the notice. Was this posted for me? It was posted for the ranch. It says kitchen operations are being reduced. They are. Hugh stopped where the packed path met the gate. The owner died in September. Feed accounts remain unpaid. So do portions of the autumn wages. The county court has not completed probate, and winter will not wait upon paperwork. How many people live here? 19 who earn their keep. The words struck with an old precision. At a mining boarding house near Leadville, Winnie had once heard a proprietor call the laundrywoman and a kitchen girl extra mouths when silver prices fell. He had ordered Winnie to cut their board before reducing portions for the men who paid cash. She refused. By nightfall, she had lost her wages and the narrow room behind the pantry. She had carried that lesson farther than the trunk now vanishing down the road. When money tightened, the first people erased were often those whose labor had never been written down. "That was not my question," Winnie said. Hugh's eyes cooled. "It is the number the estate recognizes, and the number breathing. You were hired to cook, Miss Dorsey, not to administer the population." He turned toward a low building south of the main house. "Your kitchen is there." The south cookhouse had been abandoned long enough for mice to claim the flour bins. One window was cracked from corner to corner. Soot clogged the chimney throat. The serving hatch had swollen shut, and nesting grass filled the shelf beneath it. A dented copper ladle hung beside the stove, its wooden handle split nearly through and bound with fraying twine. Winnie lifted it from the nail. The bowl was scarred but sound. It would still hold a measure. "This stove drawer?" she asked. "It did last winter. Has anyone checked the chimney since?" "No. Water. Pump behind the washhouse. Stores? What remains is under estate control." Hugh pointed toward a narrow side room. "You may prepare supper for 19 men, 1 portion each. Nothing carried to family cabins. I will inspect the issue afterward. And Sunday, families without wage positions leave. Where do they go? That is not an estate expense." Hugh walked out before she could ask who had decided hunger became less real when it belonged to someone unpaid. Winnie set her satchel on the table and opened the swollen hatch with the flat of a rusted fire shovel. Cold light entered with a strip of yard. A woman stood outside, carrying 2 buckets. She was broad-shouldered, grey threaded through her dark hair, and her skirt hem was wet from the pump path. "Agnes Finch," she said, "used to help in the main kitchen when there was one. How many people live here, Agnes?" The woman's grip tightened around the bucket handles. 31. Winnie looked toward the ranch house. Names. Agnes gave her 12. Hugh had not counted first. Mrs. Bell, who mended shirts and harness padding. Mrs. Calder, who tended the milk cows when her cough allowed. 2 older men who sharpened tools and split kindling, women who preserved roots, carried water, washed crew clothing, patched feed sacks, and watched children while other hands worked. Then Agnes named the 19 wage men. Winnie took a piece of charcoal from beneath the stove and marked the wall beside the hatch. One short black line for every person. 31 marks. "What food is not locked?" she asked. Agnes led her to what Hugh had dismissed as scraps. A crock of beans, half a pumpkin, onions with soft outer skins but sound centers, beef trimmings left from the previous day. Rendered fat in a covered tin. Winnie inspected each item before accepting it. Hope did not make spoiled food edible. Potatoes? Some families have private ones. Private food stays private unless they offer it to the common kettle and agree to an equal count. Agnes studied her. "You mean to feed them all?" "I mean to make one measure and use it honestly." They cleared ash, opened the chimney as far as they safely could, and coaxed a fire from dry chips found behind the stove. Residents came one by one when smoke began rising from the south chimney. No one asked permission to help. A boy carried water. Mrs. Bell brought a sound onion. Amos Pike, a narrow-faced ranch hand, shoved the hatch fully open and muttered that kitchen business would not keep cattle alive. Winnie told him to brace the hinge if he wished to eat through it. By dusk, beans, pumpkin, onions, beef trimmings, and fat had become a thick stew. Winnie counted 31 bowls on the work table. Hugh entered as she lifted the dented ladle. 19, he said. "I gave you the number. You gave me a payroll. The estate does not provision dependents after Sunday. It is Tuesday." His gaze went to the charcoal marks. "Erase those." Winnie filled the first bowl with one level ladle. "No, you are an employee. Then dismiss me after supper." She filled the second bowl. "Tonight, there are 31 people on this ranch, and tonight the kitchen has enough for 31 equal portions." Hugh stepped nearer the kettle. "Anything issued beyond 19 will be entered as waste. Then write the names beside the waste." That stopped him, not because he agreed, because naming the excluded would make the exclusion harder to disguise as arithmetic. Winnie continued serving. No favored bowl. No smaller measure for a child or widow. Heavy work supplements could be argued tomorrow after everyone had a base portion. Tonight, no household disappeared. The last light was leaving the valley when a rider entered the yard on a dark horse. He dismounted near the barn, spoke briefly with Amos, then crossed toward the cookhouse. He was tall without using height as display, his coat worn pale at the shoulders, his movements spare from cold and fatigue. Hugh met him at the door. Harwood. The rider removed his hat. Vickery. Winnie knew the surname before anyone explained it. Joel Harwood belonged to a distant branch of the late owner's family, but the resemblance ended with the name. He was the salaried foreman, not an heir. He owned the horse he had ridden, the wages he had saved, and whatever he could carry if Hugh dismissed him. Nothing more. Joel's eyes moved past Hugh to the serving hatch. Winnie stood behind it with the ladle in her hand, their gaze held across steam and worn wood. He did not smile. He did not stare at her as if she were another item newly delivered to the ranch. He took in the 31 marks, the empty bowls, and Hugh's anger. "She was told to feed 19, Hugh said. Joel looked at the people holding bowls in the yard. "Which one did you expect her not to feed?" Hugh drew the posted notice from inside his coat and handed it over. "You recommended the reduction." Joel read the front, then he turned the paper. Attached behind it was an autumn recommendation concerning seasonal payroll, consolidated kitchens, and attached housing expense. At the bottom stood his own signature. dark and unmistakable. Joel read his signature twice. The first time, his eyes moved over the page, as though speed might make the words less his. The second time, he stopped at each phrase: seasonal payroll, consolidated kitchens, attached housing expense. I signed a reduction recommendation after Mr. Harwood died, he said. I did not sign an order to stop household food in November. Hugh folded his arms. You advised the estate to cut what it could no longer carry. I advised fewer seasonal expenses after time to prepare. Time is another expense. The people beyond the serving hatch had begun moving away with their bowls, but no one went far. Winnie lowered the dented ladle into the empty kettle. Did your recommendation name anyone? She asked. Joel turned the page toward the fading light. No. Did it order cabins emptied? No. Did it end rations on Sunday? No. Hugh took the paper from him. The executor applies recommendations. The foreman does not administer the will. Joel did not challenge a power he did not possess. I command the ranch crew. In cattle matters, and in work assignments, field safety, and the use of their labor. Hugh's expression sharpened. Joel continued. My men will not carry families out of cabins or load their belongings for the road. No one has asked them to. Not yet. Hugh slipped the notice and recommendation inside his coat. Miss Dorsey was hired to prepare food for the necessary operation. Anything beyond 19 portions will be entered against her employment. Winnie stepped from behind the hatch. Then I want the stores counted before another spoon is issued. You have been here half a day. Long enough to find enough unlisted food for 12 people. Scraps, beans, pumpkin, onions, fat, beef trimmings. Food does not become waste because your summary omitted it. Hugh glanced at the 31 charcoal marks. Those households leave Sunday. Name them. His gaze returned to her. What? Name the people whose bowls you want left empty. Name the cabins you expect cleared. Put each one beside the order. You are in no position to demand estate papers. Then you are in no position to call an unnamed portion waste. Hugh's face remained controlled, but Winnie recognized the pause. He had expected resistance to come as pleading. Figures were harder to dismiss. Joel looked around the cookhouse. The serving hatch hung crooked. Smoke curled where the chimney drawer failed. The stove door sagged against one hinge. What do you need by morning? He asked Winnie. She did not mistake the question for rescue. A complete resident count, a physical inventory, daily fuel use, no private portion carried from this kitchen. 3 direct counters, 1 new provision sheet every 7 days. Why 3? 1 from the households, 1 from ranch labor, 1 who can answer for fuel and crew demands. Agnes Finch? Joel asked. Agnes stood near the wash basin with her sleeves rolled. I will count what passes through my hands. Nothing else. That is the rule, Winnie said. Joel glanced toward the doorway. Amos Pike still held his empty bowl. Pike, you will answer for the bunkhouse and cattle crew. Amos gave a dry laugh. I hired on to ride fence, not count onions. You hired on to keep cattle alive, Joel said. Try doing it after the kitchen fails. Amos's amusement faded. He looked at the repaired hinge he had braced, then at the bowl he had just emptied. I will count what the crew receives. Nothing you did not see, Winnie said. I know how counting works. Then we will agree. Hugh watched the agreement form around him. Kitchen arithmetic does not become an estate account because 3 servants write their names beneath it. Then anyone may compare it with yours, Winnie said. Hugh left without forbidding the count. He did not have to. Sunday still stood 3 days away. He expected cold, hunger, and disorder to prove him right before paper could prove anything else. For dawn on November 18th, Winnie cleared a place on the south wall beside the hatch. Agnes brought wrapping sheets saved from flour deliveries. The cleanest page carried an oil stain in one corner, but the center remained sound. Winnie ruled columns in charcoal, with the edge of a narrow board. Across the top, she wrote November 18th through November 24th. Beneath it came the headings: persons fed, food issued, fuel used, stores received, barter earned, spoilage, labor or cold supplements. The last narrow space she left for delivery marks if winter forced food beyond the yard. Joel entered, carrying 2 iron pins, stove wire, and a short ledger pencil. The smith says 1 pin should hold the stove door. The other will keep the hatch from dropping when the wood swells. He placed the pencil beside the page. Winnie examined it, then kept the charcoal. Pencil can be rubbed clean. Charcoal smears. Then witnesses see the figure before it does. Joel accepted the answer without telling her how to keep her own record. Where do we begin? They began with names. Agnes gave the households first. Winnie entered every resident and where that person slept. She marked illness, heavy labor, age, and limited mobility only where those facts affected food or routes. No one was listed as useless. Amos counted the 19 wage hands. Joel identified which riders were at line camp and which should return within 2 days. 31 names. The figure matched the marks Winnie had made the night before. Then they opened the stores. The locked room held less flour and cured meat than Hugh's verbal account had suggested. The south root cellar held more of almost everything he had ignored. Potatoes beneath straw, turnips with damaged tops but sound centers, pickled cabbage, rendered fat, onions, dried herbs, and 2 milk cows still producing enough to matter. Winnie separated sound from questionable and questionable from spoiled. She refused to improve the count with hope. Joel lifted each sack while Amos read its painted weight. Winnie deducted spilled flour where a seam had opened. Agnes counted crocks by condition, not by label. You expect all this to last until spring? Amos asked. No, Winnie said. I expect to learn how far it fails. By midday, the answer had begun to take shape. At the present issue, the food might last 11 weeks if spoilage stayed low. A safe winter count required closer to 16. Removing 12 people might stretch flour on paper, but it would also remove the hands that preserved roots, carried water, tended milk, mended tack, washed crew clothing, and kept cabins fit enough to prevent illness. Fewer mouths, fewer hands, earlier failure. Winnie wrote the conclusion beneath the inventory. Hugh came through the door while she was fixing the sheet to the wall. The paper curled away from the cold plaster. Joel held one corner. Winnie pressed the other flat. Their fingers brushed near the top line. Bare skin against bare skin. Brief warmth in a room that had not yet lost the night's cold. Neither of them pulled away sharply. Neither made the contact mean more than it had earned. Joel shifted his hand to the edge of the board. Winnie drove the pin through. Public enough? He asked. Public enough to make lies work harder. Hugh read the names first. The notice remains in force. Then bring the names Sunday, Winnie said. Every person you intend to remove. The estate recognizes 19 workers. The kitchen recognizes 31 bodies that must either be fed or deliberately refused. Hugh's mouth tightened. A county appraiser will value cattle, debts, and saleable property, not bowls. Then the bowls will stand beside the cattle figures. At supper, Joel waited until every household portion had passed through the hatch. Winnie filled his bowl with the same level ladle and no second measure. He ate standing near the fuel stack, while Agnes called the final count. Hugh took no portion. He watched instead. When service ended, the split handle shifted beneath Winnie's grip. Joel noticed. "That will not hold another week. It must hold tonight. Let me bind it." Winnie examined the fraying twine. After washing, "You need it before dawn. Then bring it back before the first kettle." Joel waited until she offered the ladle. He did not take it from her hand before she chose to release it. "Before the first kettle," he said. Hugh left with the Sunday notice still inside his coat. Winnie returned to sheet 1 and entered 31 portions under the first day. Beside them, she wrote no private issue. The page did not create more food. It did something Hugh had counted on avoiding. It made every missing person visible before Sunday arrived. Mrs. Bell's trunk stood outside her cabin before sunrise on Sunday. Bedding was tied across the lid with clothesline, and her sewing basket rested on top beneath a folded shawl. Frost silvered the rope. She stood beside it, wearing her coat over her nightdress, one hand fixed around the basket handle as though Hugh might count hesitation as consent. A light wagon waited in the lane. Hugh Vickery had brought 2 empty freight blankets and an order for Joel's crew to load the trunk. Winnie crossed the yard, carrying sheet 1 under her coat. The dented ladle hung behind her in the cookhouse, its split handle now bound with fresh rawhide. Joel had returned it before the first kettle on Friday, as promised. He stood between Hugh and the 2 ranch hands Hugh had summoned. "My men are not loading that wagon," Joel said. Hugh rested both hands on his cane. "The cabin belongs to the estate. The crew belongs to field work and safety assignments. You are refusing a lawful instruction from the executor. I am refusing to send a woman onto a winter road with no destination, no shelter, and less than 8 hours of daylight." Mrs. Bell's face tightened, but she did not ask him to save her. Winnie respected that. Hugh turned toward the ranch hands. "Load the trunk." Neither man moved. Amos Pike stood nearest the wagon. He looked at Joel, then at the mended strap looped over the wagon rail. Mrs. Bell had repaired that strap 2 nights earlier after the old stitching split. "I take work orders from the foreman," Amos said. "In cattle matters, that strap pulled feed yesterday." Hugh's mouth thinned. "Sentiment does not alter ownership." "No," Winnie said, "but expense does." She opened sheet 1 on the wagon bed and held the corners against the wind. 31 names ran down the first column. Food, fuel, work, and stores filled the lines beside them. Mrs. Bell has repaired 3 feed sacks, 1 blanket, 2 shirts, and the strap on this wagon. Remove her today, and those tasks move to paid hands or remain undone. Domestic favors do not create tenancy. I did not say they did. I said, removing her increases the costs you claim to be reducing. Hugh glanced at the paper without leaning close enough to appear interested. One woman's needle will not preserve an estate. Winnie turned the sheet so Amos could see it. How many hours did the West crew lose when the old strap failed? Half a day. How many men? 3. And what did the repair cost the estate? Amos looked at Mrs. Bell. Thread already in the cabin. Wool from a blanket too worn for use. Winnie faced Hugh again. You may call her labor invisible. The cattle still know when it is missing. Hugh looked past her toward the other cabins. Doors had opened. Men and women stood in the cold without approaching. He had expected private fear. Winnie had given it witnesses. The notice was posted under my authority, he said. And it said Sunday, Winnie replied. Sunday is here. Name every person you intend to remove. Name where each one is supposed to go. Then enter the labor lost, the food saved, and the cost transferred to the remaining crew. You have no authority to require an estate accounting. Then I have no authority to pretend your arithmetic is complete. Joel did not take the sheet from her or speak over the answer. He held his position between the wagon and the ranch hands, protection without possession. Hugh saw the line he could not cross easily. He could order the cabins cleared, but without Joel's crew, he would need hired labor, a wagon, and a destination. Force would also give the county appraiser a visible act to examine. The immediate loading is deferred, he said. Mrs. Bell's fingers loosened on the sewing basket. Hugh raised his voice so the cabin doors could hear. Physical clearance will occur under the estate's working schedule on December 31st. Household rations and occupancy remain subject to that schedule. Winnie watched his face. Show us the schedule. It is an executor's working paper. Then December 31st is the date you are placing before witnesses. Yes, the answer gave them time. It did not give them safety. Hugh turned to Joel. Your refusal will be entered. Enter the weather, the empty road, and the lack of destination beside it. Hugh climbed into the wagon and took the reins himself. He left the freight blankets, but carried the threat back toward the ranch house. Mrs. Bell stood beside her trunk after the wheels had gone. No one cheered. The danger had moved, not vanished. Winnie closed sheet 1. Bring it inside, she said. Mrs. Bell lifted the sewing basket. Amos and another hand carried the trunk back through the cabin door. This time, they did it because she asked. By noon, the South Cookhouse held representatives from every cabin and the cattle crew. Winnie spread a clean wrapping sheet on the work table. December 31st gives us 5 weeks, Agnes said. The appraisal is later than that, Joel replied. If Hugh clears the cabins first, the appraiser may only see an empty ranch. Winnie placed the resident count beside the inventory. Then we need rules that make removal look like operational damage before he can call it household sentiment. She wrote the first line, equal base ration for every resident. The second, additional portions only for heavy labor, illness, age, or cold exposure. Then, no private portion for executor, foreman, cook, or favored hand. Household work entered beside ranch work. Weekly figures posted and read aloud. Barter credited to the person or household earning it. No child sent on a dangerous route. You cannot bind the estate to this, Amos said. No, Winnie answered. I can bind my ladle. Agnes can bind what she counts. You can bind what passes to the bunkhouse. Joel can bind his crew. Mrs. Bell touched the line about household work and the cabins. The compact cannot grant tenancy, Winnie said. It can prove what the ranch loses if a household is removed. She did not offer comfort she could not guarantee. That honesty brought the first signatures. Agnes signed beside stores and preservation. Amos signed beside crew portions and fuel he directly saw. Mrs. Bell made her mark beside mending. Others added names only where they accepted a task. Joel signed last. Joel Harwood, foreman, nothing more. No owner's title. No promise he lacked power to keep. Winnie carried the compact to the south wall above sheet 1. The board sat high because steam had warped the lower plaster. She climbed the short ladder with 2 iron pins between her lips. Joel came to the left side and stopped with his hand open. Where may I steady you? She looked down. His palm remained several inches from the rail. Left side, below my heel. He placed his hand there and nowhere else. The ladder held firm while Winnie drove the first pin. Hugh entered as she fixed the second. You are making policy on flour wrapping. Winnie descended. Joel did not release the rail until both her feet reached the floor. Call it kitchen policy, she said. The kitchen is estate property. The measure is in my hand. Hugh read the compact. This does not prevent clearance. No, Winnie said. It records the cost. Joel drew a folded letter from his coat. A rider leaves for Buena Vista this afternoon. I am requesting that the court-appointed estate appraiser inspect the working records and confirm the review date. Hugh's head came up. You do not correspond for the estate. I correspond as foreman regarding cattle operations and winter labor. You are building a case against the executor. I am building a record before 31 people are reduced to 19 on paper. Hugh stepped close enough that the stove light caught the edge of his face. Your employment after settlement depends on cooperation. Then the heirs may decide whether accurate numbers are disobedience. The rider left before dusk with Joel's letter sealed inside his coat. For the next 2 days, the compact became work. Sound routes were separated from soft ones. Fuel was stacked by measure. The 2 milk cows were entered by what they consumed and returned. The south cookhouse proved easier to heat than the larger abandoned main kitchen, because its root cellar opened beneath the work table and its brick chamber held warmth after the fire dropped. On Tuesday, November 24th, the rider returned from Buena Vista with frost in his scarf and a folded answer from the county clerk. The court-appointed appraisal was scheduled for February 2nd, 1892, weather permitting. Working records could be presented. Winnie pinned the letter beside the compact. 10 weeks, Agnes said. Winnie looked at the 11-week food estimate, then at the thin dry wood stack. The road may not open for 16. Joel studied the same figures. Food fails first if spoilage rises. Fuel fails first if the cold deepens. Wagon chains rattled outside before either could say more. Winnie opened the serving hatch. Hugh stood beside a freight wagon loaded high with Slate Hollow's driest split wood. Joel crossed the yard at a run. That wood is entered for winter. Hugh gave the driver a signal. It is estate, property under contract for cash. You sold the clean stock? I converted idle fuel into value. The wagon rolled through the gate toward Buena Vista, carrying the wood that burned hottest and smoked least. Hugh watched the south cookhouse chimney, where a narrow thread of grey rose into the cold. You wanted time until December 31st, he said. Now show me what your public count can burn. The wagon carrying Slate Hollow's driest wood disappeared down the Buena Vista road before the south cookhouse fire had reached a full flame. Winnie watched the last stacked cord pass between the cottonwoods, then closed the serving hatch against the cold. Anger would not heat a kettle. Every lid that fits anything, she told Agnes. Every scrap of wool too worn for blankets. And the grain sacks by the wash bench. Hugh remained in the yard long enough to see whether she would come out and argue. She did not. Inside, Winnie cut the morning fire to one narrow bed of coals. Beans were soaked before they touched the kettle. Roots were chopped smaller and added only after the water boiled. Agnes packed straw around covered crocks and lined the shallow brick chamber beside the stove with folded wool. When the flame dropped, the food kept cooking inside retained heat. The room cooled near the cracked window, but the stew did not. Joel entered, carrying deadfall pine and short lengths of broken fence rail. Some of this is green, he said. Winnie split one piece with the kitchen hatchet and pressed her thumb to the pale center. It will smoke. Dry chips can start it. Then we burn the wet wood only after the chimney is hot. Joel stacked the bundle beside the measured fuel, not on top of it. Count it before we use it. Winnie entered the amount on sheet 2, which began November 25th, beneath the closed first week. By noon, ranch hands had brought brush, fallen cottonwood limbs, and rails too short for fence work. No piece entered the stove until Agnes called the amount, and Amos Pike witnessed it. Hugh passed the doorway twice. He did not interfere. He expected the fire itself to prove him right. For 6 days, Winnie answered without speaking to him. Breakfast oats finished in the brick chamber after the coals were banked. Midday beans shared the same boil as supper stew. Wash water warmed behind the main kettle instead of over a second flame. No private coffee was heated after service. When one rider tried, Amos took the pot from him. "Same count," he said. It was the first time he enforced a kitchen rule without Joel beside him. Sheet 2 showed lower fuel use than Hugh's estimate and 31 portions served each day. The victory remained narrow. Fuel had been stretched, not replaced. Then the weather changed. On the last night of November, wind came down from the western slopes and drove loose snow against the cabins. By dawn, the path to Mrs. Bell's door had vanished beneath a drift. The creek crossing toward the line camp froze black and thin. Mrs. Calder's cough worsened, and a rider with a swollen wrist could not safely carry a lidded kettle over broken ground. The question was no longer whether the cookhouse could prepare enough food. It was whether enough food could reach the people before it froze. Winnie stood at the work table with sheet 2 waiting to close and the next week's page ready beneath it. "How far to the outer cabins?" she asked Joel. He traced the routes with one finger against the wood. Bell Cabin, near 2 miles by the fence. Carter Place close to 3. Dairy Shed less than 1. Far Line Camp 6 if the marked draw holds. If it does not, 8 by the fence road. Agnes set a lidded kettle on the table. It will be cold before Bell. Winnie looked at the old grain sacks and the wool scraps around the retained heat chamber. Not if the kettle wears what the crock wears. Before breakfast cleared, she had the first carrier laid out. A lidded kettle sat inside a straw-lined sack, wrapped in wool and tied below the handle. Each route received a color and a small card marked with its destination. Blue for the bunkhouse, red for Bell, white for the north cabins, yellow for the dairy shed, green for the far line camp. The receiving household would mark the card and return it with the empty kettle. "Why colors if the names are written?" Amos asked. "Because wind, dark and cold make poor readers of tired men," Winnie said. "A color can be seen before a card can be opened." A boy of about 12 stood near the hatch, listening. "I can take yellow." "No, it is not even a mile." "Then an adult can walk it." "I know the path, and the compact says no child on a dangerous route." The boy looked ready to argue. Agnes rested a hand on his shoulder. "You heard her." Winnie turned to the gathered adults. "No one goes alone beyond the dairy. No creek shortcut. Every route carries a blanket, a striker, and an extra portion sealed for delay. If the west wind covers the ridge before the return, stop at the nearest occupied cabin." Hugh entered while she assigned the pairs. "You are turning cattle hands into serving boys." Joel stood near the root board. "The cattle hands eat from the same kettles. Their time belongs to the estate. So does keeping them fit to work." Hugh pointed toward the green strip. "The line camp is provisioned, with dried meal and salt beef," Joel said. "No hot food since yesterday morning. Then send a camp rider. One horse is lame. The other man is checking the south fence." Hugh's voice hardened. "That is field work. So is having him able to ride tomorrow." Hugh's gaze moved to Winnie. "You have become expensive." "Not yet," she said. "The colors cost scraps." He left without giving permission. Winnie did not need permission to assign the kitchen's measure. Blue returned first. Yellow followed before noon. Red came back as snow began moving sideways across the yard. White returned near dusk with both kettles empty and the cards marked. Green had not left. Joel stood by the table, wearing his winter coat and holding the reins of an estate horse assigned to field duty. "The far camp still needs food," he said. Winnie checked the sky through the cracked window. The cloud line had lowered, but the west ridge remained visible. "2 riders. Amos will take the second place." Amos pulled on his gloves. Winnie lifted the green seal and marked card. "South fence. Stay in the draw. No creek crossing, even if the ice looks sound. If the ridge disappears, turn back to Bell Cabin." Joel opened his hand. Winnie placed the green strip and card against his glove, then closed his fingers around them. The contact was deliberate, brief. His hand remained where she had shaped it until she let go. "Bring the seal back," she said, "and the kettle. Both." They left before noon on December 2nd, the first day of sheet 3. The wind sharpened by afternoon. At dusk, Winnie counted every root except green. She kept the stove at supper heat, not rescue heat. Burning through the remaining fuel would not bring Joel and Amos home faster. She sent no second party into the weather. The route had been chosen. The instructions had been heard. Trust had a cost no ledger could disguise. Hugh came after the evening service and looked at the empty green line. "Your foreman has missed the count. He is on a route he accepted. If he is injured, your seal will not warm him." Winnie marked the 4 returned routes. Neither will sending 3 more people into the same dark. Agnes banked the fire. Enough heat remains for the kettle when it comes. Near midnight, hoofbeats sounded beyond the washhouse. Amos entered first, leading the horse. Frost whitened his coat sleeves. Joel followed with the green kettle beneath one arm. The wool wrapping was wet, but the lid remained tied. He set it on the work table and opened his hand. The green seal lay there, marked and returned. Winnie took it. Why late? A line rider had not reached the cabin before dark. We waited until he came in. The creek? We stayed in the draw. Amos pulled off one glove with his teeth. Charlotte would have saved half an hour. Joel's eyes met Winnie's. "It was not the route I promised." She entered the final mark before closing the day's count. Every kettle accounted for, every seal returned. No rescue party lost to panic. The next morning, Hugh nailed a fresh order beside the stable door. Estate horses, surrounds for cattle work, medical emergency, and contracted freight. No domestic food carriage. Joel read it once, then looked toward the south cookhouse, where the colored seals hung drying above the stove. Hugh had failed to stop the food now. He meant to stop the road. The horseban did not stop the kettles. It made every mile cost human strength instead. By December 8th, the blue route went on foot. Yellow used a hand sled when the snow packed hard enough, and Red combined 2 cabins whenever weather allowed. The far green route left only when Joel could tie it to line camp work, because no estate horse could now carry food merely because people needed it. Winnie shortened what she could and counted what she could not. No kettle left half full because the road had once been shorter. No route earned an extra portion simply for being familiar. Sheet 3 closed that evening with 31 names still on the count, fuel lower than Hugh had predicted, and no spoiled flour. Sheet 4 began the next morning. The figures had started doing what Hugh most disliked. They made invisible work expensive to ignore. Mrs. Bell repaired a breast strap that had split near the buckle during an ice pull. Agnes sorted 3 bins of turnips before rot spread from the damaged tops. Mrs. Calder's milk allowed 2 sick residents and 1 child to keep smaller work portions without losing strength. Winnie entered only those 3 examples, enough to prove the pattern. Not enough to bury the truth beneath detail. Amos Pike carried the repaired strap into the cookhouse after the West Fence team returned. "Held through the whole pull," he said. "Old stitching would have cost us half a day again." Hugh stood near the serving hatch reading the fuel line. A repaired strap does not make household labor an estate account. Amos laid the leather on the table. It kept estate cattle from standing hungry while we fetched another team. The estate owes feed invoices, autumn wages, and carrying costs into spring, Hugh said. What it needs is cash. Winnie marked the repair beneath the household labor column. Then count the expense it prevented. Avoided expense is not income. No, it is value the estate did not have to buy twice. Hugh's gaze hardened, but he did not order the entry removed. He had been more candid since the Sunday confrontation. The creditors were pressing. Hay had been bought on promises made before the owner died. 2 men still lacked part of their autumn wages. If the ranch carried every household through winter and the cattle market fell, Hugh believed the estate might lose more than cabins. He was not inventing the danger. He was deciding whose lives could be cut away to answer it. That was worse in a quieter way. Joel came in after dark with frost along his shoulders. He checked the repaired strap, the fuel count, and the crew supplements, then ate from the same kettle after the final household bowl passed through the hatch. He did not ask Winnie to explain the system again. He had begun reading it before he spoke. The dented copper ladle lay beside the wash basin. The rawhide binding had darkened from steam and grease, and the split beneath it had begun to move. Joel lifted the handle just enough to test the looseness. It will not hold another week. It will hold tonight. May I replace it? Winnie looked at the scarred copper bowl. Not the ladle, the handle. He set a smooth length of applewood on the work table. One end had already been shaved narrow enough to fit the socket. Plain wood, he said. No polish. No change to the measure. Winnie ran her thumb along the grain. Back before breakfast. Before the first water boils. She laid the ladle across both palms and passed it to him. Joel wrapped it in a clean cloth and left. At dawn, it hung again beside the stove. The applewood handle was fitted tight, rounded, where a working hand would close, and left unvarnished. The dents remained in the copper. Winnie dipped it into a bucket and lifted. The bowl came up level. "You left the marks," she said. Joel stood near the door, snow melting from his boots. "They do not keep it from holding true." "No. Then they were not mine to remove." Agnes entered, carrying onions, and stopped beneath the hook. Better than pretty. Winnie hung the ladle over the first kettle. Better than loose. The cookhouse filled before sunrise. Sheet 4 gathered its figures day by day. Fuel, rations, labor, roots. Barter not yet earned, but discussed. Hugh passed through with creditor letters tucked beneath his coat and a face drawn thinner by each one. No one mistook his pressure for innocence. On the 11th of December, a kettle lid slipped when Winnie moved it from the stove. Steam struck 2 fingers of her left hand. Pain flared white across the knuckles. She set the lid down instead of dropping it. "Cold water," she said. Joel reached the basin first and filled it from the covered bucket. He placed it before her without taking her hand. Winnie plunged her fingers into the water herself. Agnes examined the skin after the first heat passed. Red, tender, no blistering yet. "Keep them cool," Agnes said. "No lifting lids with that hand. I can stir." "With the other." Joel stood across the table, one hand braced against the edge. "Who takes noon?" he asked. Winnie checked the route board. Amos counts yellow. Mrs. Bell can close red, as I will serve. Can you? Yes, I will not carry. He nodded and assigned 2 hands to the lifting. No one took the ladle from her or treated the burn as proof that her authority had ended. The fingers stayed wrapped through the next several days. By December 16th, Sheet 4 had closed, and Sheet 5 began. The burn had not blistered, though heat still pulled at the skin if she forgot, and reached too quickly. Joel returned from the north pasture near dusk with a torn glove and ice darkening the leather along the heel of his right palm. He reached toward the kettle yoke. Winnie caught his wrist. "Stop." Joel stopped. The motion brought him close enough that cold came off his sleeve. Her hand circled the wool above the glove cuff, firm and intentional. "Turn your hand." He did. The seam had split wide enough to expose skin to wet rope. "You cannot lift hot iron with this. I have another glove in the bunkhouse. The kettle is here." Winnie released him only after he lowered his hand. She took waxed thread from the repair basket and stitched the leather while he waited. The new applewood ladle hung above them, its copper dents catching stove light. "Try it," she said. Joel flexed his hand. "It will hold, then use it." His eyes moved to the light wrapping on her left fingers. "Yours? Healing. You saw my hand before your own. Your glove was open." That was all she gave him. He accepted it without asking for more. The air between them had changed, not because the touch was large, but because neither of them pretended it meant nothing. Hugh entered, carrying a folded contract notice from Buena Vista. "A winter ore hauler needs 2 teams and 6 men," he told Joel. "Cash enough to preserve the cattle crew through January." Winnie set down the repaired glove. "And the households?" Hugh did not turn toward her. "The contract concerns productive labor." Joel unfolded the notice. "What does it require?" "Priority feed for riders and stock. The teams move when weather permits." "From which stores?" "The estates. All 31 depend on those stores." Hugh's voice cooled. 19 wage hands preserve the herd. The others consume what should sustain them. "The others repair what the wage hands break," Amos said from the doorway. Hugh ignored him. "Take the contract, Harwood, or explain to the creditors why sentiment outweighed cash." Joel read the page again. "What happens to family rations if I accept?" "They end under the estate schedule." "Show me the schedule." Hugh's answer came too fast. "Your recommendation already supports it." The cookhouse went still enough for Winnie to hear the fire settle behind the grate. Joel folded the contract notice once and laid it on the table. "That is not what I asked." Hugh collected neither the paper nor his temper. "You signed the reduction." "I signed words. I want to see what you placed behind them." Hugh left the notice where it lay and walked out. Joel waited until evening service ended. Then he crossed to the estate office alone. The door was not locked. A lamp burned beside Hugh's desk. Beneath a brass paperweight lay the autumn recommendation, folded along the same old creases. Joel opened it. Reduce seasonal payroll, consolidate kitchens, lower attached housing expense until settlement. At the bottom stood his signature, dark and certain. No names, no Sunday, no December 31st, no order to empty a cabin. Joel read the page twice. The first reading told him Hugh had gone beyond the wording. The second told him the wording had still given Hugh somewhere to begin. Joel left the recommendation where he had found it. He folded the page along its old creases, returned it beneath the brass paperweight, and extinguished the office lamp before crossing the yard. Taking the paper, would have given Hugh an accusation easier to defend than the truth. Leaving it did not lessen what the signature meant. The South cookhouse held only the red glow of banked coals when Joel entered. Winnie stood at the work table with sheet, 5 open beneath her right hand. The 2 burned fingers on her left had healed enough that the wrapping was gone, though. Heat still pulled at the skin if she reached too quickly. She entered the last returned route mark before looking up. "You found the paper. The wording is mine." Agnes slept in the service room beyond the partition. No one else remained close enough to hear. "Seasonal payroll," Joel said. "Consolidated kitchens. Attached housing expense." Winnie set down the charcoal. "No names? No. No Sunday? No December 31st? No. No order to empty cabins? No." Joel rested both hands against the table edge. "Hugh went beyond what I signed." "Yes." The answer came without comfort. "And he began from what you gave him." Joel held her gaze. "Yes." Winnie flexed her left hand once. "Put the page back where it belongs." "I did." "Good. If he can call it stolen, he will not have to answer what it says." Joel nodded. He did not ask whether she believed he had meant harm. That question would have asked her to lighten what he had not yet carried. By morning, the kitchen faced a problem no confession could solve. The 2 milk cows had begun to fall off. Their oat allotment was nearly gone, and the remaining chaff would not carry them through the next hard cold. The cheese shelf held 1 dry rind. If the cows stopped producing, the children, sick residents, and older people would have to draw more heavily from the same stores, feeding the cattle crew. Agnes knew of a dairy holding south of Slate Hollow, where a widow kept 3 cows and a young heifer. The holding needed harness repair and spring labor more than promises from a probate estate. "I want to offer work," Winnie told Joel after breakfast. "Mending now. Harness repair before New Year. Garden and fence work after thaw. In return, oats, chaff, and whatever cheese she can spare. Hugh will not release an estate team. I did not ask him to." Joel looked toward the stable. "My bay mare is mine. So is the light sled." The mare had been bought from his wages before the owner died. Hugh could not place her under the horse ban without claiming property that was not estate-owned. "Your private feed?" Winnie asked. "Enough for the trip and return. Then nothing is charged to Slate Hollow except what we bring back." Joel hitched the mare after the morning roots left. The sled carried waxed thread, leather scraps, 2 folded blankets, an empty cheese crate, and a repair roll entered as household materials already on hand. Winnie tucked the proposed barter terms inside her coat. Joel adjusted the blanket across her knees, only after she lifted one edge to show she accepted the help. The road south had hardened under 2 nights of frost. The runners whispered over packed snow, then rasped where wind had stripped the track to frozen earth. Joel kept the mare to a walk on the rise. "How much can you promise without Hugh's leave?" he asked. "Labor freely offered by the people. Named. Repairs using scraps already entered. No estate animal, grain, or money. And the milk share, Comancheshal. We help with spring planting and reset a short fence. In return, 1 measured share after the heifer calves, if she calves, safely and produces enough. No promise built on an unborn calf. That is why it will be written as conditional." Joel's mouth moved at one corner. "You leave little room for a man to improve the terms. You came to witness them, not improve them." The widow met them beside a low barn with flour dust on one sleeve and no patience for estate assurances. She read the first page, then looked at Joel. "Who guarantees spring labor?" Joel did not answer for Winnie. "The households named beside each task," Winnie said. No person is bound beyond what she or he signs. If the ranch changes hands before thaw, the obligation does not pass unless the new owner accepts it. And if no one accepts, then the milk share does not pass either. The oats, chaff, and cheese are paid by the repairs and mending completed now. The widow read the terms again. 6 feed sacks mended before New Year. 1 broken breast strap repaired with the widow's own leather. 2 days of garden labor after thaw. Help resetting a short fence. In return, 3 sacks of oats, 1 sack of chaff, 2 rounds of hard cheese, and a conditional milk share from the heifer after calving. You write like somebody expects to be cheated, the widow said. I write like somebody expects to remember. That earned a brief smile. The widow signed 1 copy and kept it. Winnie folded the second into her coat. They loaded the grain low on the sled, tied the cheese crate behind it, and started back before the sun dropped behind the western ridge. Snow began near the cottonwoods, fine enough to vanish against Joel's dark sleeve. For the first mile, he spoke only to the mare. Then he said, I believed the families would have time. Winnie watched the runners pass over the white road. Did Hugh promise that? He said no household would be removed without notice. Notice is not time. I know. They knew before you did. Joel accepted the words without defense. I counted riders, feed, cattle loss, wages. I did not count the people who kept milk, repaired straps, washed clothes, preserved food, or carried kettles after the horses were barred. You counted men in saddles and forgot who kept them able to ride. Yes, the mare slipped on a frozen rut and recovered. Joel eased the reins, letting her choose the footing. Do you believe I meant to harm them? The question came close to asking for absolution, but he left room for an answer he might not like. Winnie turned toward him. Snow gathered along the brim of his hat. I believe you meant to save what you understood. Joel waited. And what you did not understand was made to pay for it. His jaw tightened once. That is not the same as meaning harm, Winnie said. No, it is not the same as doing none. He looked ahead again. Intention does not feed anyone. Then I will answer for what it did, not only what I meant. The sentence asked for no immediate trust. It offered a standard he could still fail. That made it worth remembering. By dusk, the oats were entered under stores received, the cheese placed on the cool shelf, and the chaff assigned to the milk cows. Agnes checked the barter copy and signed only beside what she saw unloaded. Joel lifted the last sack, then stayed near the stove while Winnie closed the day's figures. Snow had melted into a dark line across her shoulder. Joel reached toward it, stopped, and waited. Winnie did not move away. His fingers brushed the snow from the wool. The gesture should have ended there. His hand rose slightly, then halted beside her cheek. A question without words. Winnie stepped closer. The stove gave a low pop behind them. Joel's breath warmed the narrow air between their faces. Their foreheads nearly touched, near enough for desire to become undeniable. Not near enough to mistake it for trust completed. Neither crossed the final distance. Hugh's voice came from the outer room. Miss Dorsey, the oats entry. Winnie stepped back first. Joel lowered his hand at once. Hugh led her across the yard to the estate office and opened the file beside the ledger. 3 sacks, he said. Explain why the estate owes for them. Winnie placed the barter copy on the desk. It does not. Present goods are paid by repairs and mending. Spring labor is tied only to a future milk share. Hugh read the agreement. Behind it, the original recommendation lay beneath the brass paperweight. Fresh black thread passed through 2 holes near the upper edge and bound a second sheet behind it. Winnie saw only one folded corner and the dark edge of handwriting before Hugh closed the file under his palm. "Your answer is sufficient," he said. She left knowing less than she wanted and more than Hugh intended. Joel's signature was only on the first page. Hugh left the estate file open on Christmas morning because he believed the paper beneath his hand was safer half seen than fully understood. He had summoned Winnie to answer for the oats barter again, though every sack already stood on sheet. 6 under stores received, and every promised task had a name beside it. "The milk cows are consuming more than the cattle summary allows," he said. Winnie kept both hands at her sides. The burn on her left fingers had healed enough that no wrapping remained, but the skin still tightened near heat. The oats did not come from the estate store. They support estate animals. They were paid for with repairs and mending. Hugh turned toward the outer room when a rider called from the porch, "Do not touch the file." He left the office door open behind him. The original recommendation lay beneath the brass paperweight, Joel's signature visible at the bottom. Fresh black thread passed through 2 holes at the top and bound a second sheet behind it. Winnie did not lift the file. She bent close enough to read what Hugh had fastened beneath Joel's words. Household rations terminated December 31st. Family cabins cleared for estate possession. Kitchen livestock and draft teams prepared for sale. Domestic operations reduced to service for 19 wage hands. The date settled first, December 31st. The formal schedule Hugh had refused to show them after his Sunday attempt. The notice, nailed at the gate, had not been the schedule. It had been Hugh trying to force the result more than a month early. Winnie read the lines once more, then returned her eyes to the first page. Reduce seasonal payroll. Consolidate kitchens. Lower attached housing expense. Joel had not named the people. Hugh had. Joel had still given him the language that made them easy to turn into expense. Boots crossed the porch. Winnie straightened before Hugh returned. His attention went first to the file, then to her face. "You were told not to touch it. I did not. Yet you read it. You left it open." Hugh placed his palm across the attached schedule. "The second page is an executor's working order. Then, why bind it behind a recommendation Joel signed?" "Because his field judgment supports the reduction. His signature is not on this page. Responsibility does not end at the edge of a name. Neither does yours." Hugh closed the file. "Take care, Miss Dorsey. I am taking care of 31 people. You are using a kitchen appointment to interfere with probate administration. You used a Sunday notice to interfere with your own December schedule." His face sharpened. The earlier notice was an attempt to prevent further loss. It was an attempt to empty cabins before anyone outside this ranch could see who lived in them. Hugh's cane struck the floor once. "Your employment can end before supper. Then sheet 6 will record 31 residents, 1 discharged cook, and an executor who knows which cabins will be cold by New Year." He did not dismiss her. The cookhouse had become too useful to remove without proving her argument. Winnie crossed the yard to the lower barn. Joel was wrapping a mare's hock where ice had cut the skin. He finished tying the bandage before turning. "You saw it." "December 31st, she said. "Rations end. Family cabins cleared. Kitchen livestock and draft teams marked for sale. Domestic work kept only for 19 wage hands." Joel's hand remained on the bandage roll. "My signature?" "Only on the recommendation." His shoulders drew back as if preparing for blame. Winnie did not let him choose a simpler version of it. The Sunday notice was Hugh's attempt to carry out the schedule early. He failed because your crew would not help, and because the Count made the cost visible. Then he used my words twice. Yes, but I did not sign the attachment. No. Winnie stepped nearer the stall rail. Do not make that the whole truth. Joel met her gaze. Say the rest. You wrote that seasonal payroll and attached housing should be reduced. Hugh decided the people were the expense. He chose the date, the hunger, and the empty cabins, but your language opened the door. The mare shifted behind him, leather creaking against the post. Joel did not say Hugh deceived him. He did not say the estate was desperate. Yes, he said. Winnie's anger did not ease. It became useful. What will you do? Tell them. Who? Everyone living under that schedule. By noon, the South Cookhouse held all 31 residents, or someone speaking for each cabin. Men stood beneath the winter compact. Women sat near the stove. Agnes held sheet 6 against the serving board. Amos Pike remained by the fuel stack with his hat in both hands. Hugh stood near the door, close enough to hear and far enough to deny belonging to the circle. Joel faced the room without the recommendation before him. 3 days after the owner died, he began, I signed a paper recommending reduced seasonal payroll, combined kitchen work, and lower attached housing expense. No one interrupted. I believed families would have time. I did not ask how much. I did not ask where they would go. I counted cattle, feed, riders, wages, and field loss. I did not count the people who kept milk, repaired tack, washed clothes, preserved food, and carried meals when estate horses were denied. Mrs. Bell's chin lifted. Amos stared at the repaired breast strap hanging near the door. Joel continued. Mr. Vickery attached a second sheet I did not sign. It ends household rations, December 31st, clears family cabins, and prepares kitchen animals and draft teams for sale. The notice posted for Sunday attempted that result earlier. Hugh stepped forward. The attachment applies the recommendation under lawful executor authority. Joel turned toward him. It applies more than I wrote. It follows what you meant, and I gave you words broad enough to claim that. Joel faced the residents again. That failure is mine. I will not use the missing signature to pretend I had no part. He drew a folded page from inside his coat. This retracts my recommendation as it is being used. It states that household labor supports cattle operations, that family clearance before appraisal threatens winter survival, and that the South Cookhouse records should be examined with the field accounts. Hugh's voice cut across the room. You cannot revoke a report already received. I can tell the appraiser it no longer represents my judgment. Your employment after settlement depends on cooperation. Then employment cannot buy my silence. Joel signed the retraction. Agnes read it aloud. Amos checked the wording before signing only that he had heard it, Mrs. Bell made her mark beside the line naming household labor. Winnie did not add her name. The admission belonged to Joel. Her evidence already stood where it should. A rider left for Buena Vista before the afternoon wind rose, carrying the retraction inside his coat. Hugh watched from the office porch. By supper, he had prepared another paper. He placed it on the cookhouse table before Joel. Foreman's operational endorsement. The wording declared family housing unnecessary to cattle operations, directed the crew to assist an orderly cabin, clearance, and authorized Hugh to attach the endorsement to the liquidation recommendation. I will not sign this, Joel said. Hugh set a separate tally beside it. 6 sacks of flour, 2 barrels of beans, full cattle crew ration through January. Several riders in the room had cracked lips and hollow eyes from the cold. Hugh knew where hunger pressed hardest. Feed the men who preserve the herd. he said. All you must do is certify what your first recommendation already implied. Joel did not touch the endorsement. The food remains under lock in my storeroom until you accept the terms. Then it remains there, for now. Hugh left the unsigned paper on the table. Across the yard, the flour sacks and bean barrels stayed inside his locked storeroom, unseen, but no less present. Later, after the cookhouse emptied, Winnie found Joel alone near the repair bench with the kettle yoke across his knees and an awl in one hand. The strap needed no work urgent enough to keep him there. You told them, she said. They had the right to hear it from me. You did not ask them to forgive you. They do not owe it. Winnie stood before him. Public truth did not undo the harm. I know. It changed what can happen next. Joel set the awl down. He did not rise toward her. He did not reach for comfort he had not been offered. Winnie closed the distance and put both arms around him. Joel remained still until her hold settled fully, and her cheek rested against his coat. Only then did his arms come around her, strong without tightening her into place. The embrace carried no innocence. It carried warmth, consequence, and the first trust she had chosen to return. When Winnie stepped back, Joel released her at once. On the table behind them, the unsigned endorsement waited. Across the yard, so did the food. The 6 flour sacks and 2 bean barrels remained behind Hugh's lock through December 29th. Joel passed the storeroom twice that day and heard the iron key turn each time Hugh entered. The unsigned endorsement stayed on the south cookhouse table, folded beneath a stone so the draft could not move it. Hunger had become a bargain with 2 separate locations. The paper where everyone could see it, the food where no one could count it. By the morning of December 30th, the cold had hardened beyond argument. Sheet 7 began under a white sky, and a wind that lifted loose snow from the roofs in long, dry ribbons. Men broke ice at the troughs before dawn and returned after dark, with their scarves frozen where breath had gathered. One rider dropped a cinch strap because his fingers would not close. Another stood over supper, too tired to eat, until Winnie told him to sit and placed the bowl within reach. She increased the heavy work supplement and entered every extra measure. No household base portion was reduced. The figures tightened anyway. Hugh found Joel near the cattle pens replacing a cracked axe handle. The provisions are still available, he said. You certify that family housing is not necessary to cattle operations. Your crew assists the clearance after New Year. The flour and beans are released. Joel kept shaving the wood. No, your men are failing in front of you. Then release the food to the public count. It was purchased for the men, preserving the herd. The households preserve the men. Hugh glanced toward Amos, who was hauling broken ice from the trough. Mrs. Bell does not pull calves from snow. She repairs the straps that let Amos reach them. You have become fond of phrases I have become tired of, pretending the work stops where wages stop. Hugh drew the folded endorsement from inside his coat. 3 days. Take custody now. Sign after necessity teaches you what principle will not. I will not sign. I did not ask you to sign today. The offer changed shape without losing its price. By afternoon, 2 riders came in shaking from a fence repair, and Joel saw the answer Hugh had prepared for him. Not in law, in bodies. He told himself taking the food did not bind him to the endorsement. He would hold it, feed no one privately, and force Hugh into a better agreement. He told himself custody was not acceptance. The distinction lasted until the storeroom door opened. Amos and 2 other hands witnessed the seals before the goods moved. 6 flour sacks, 2 bean barrels, all tied or bunged. Hugh said nothing about the endorsement, while the men carried them across the yard to the bunkhouse shed. He did not need to. Joel ordered the shed locked and kept the key. No sack opened, he told Amos. Not without a count. Amos looked at him. Whose count? Joel had no answer that did not already contain the wrong. Supper exposed it. Amos returned the blue kettle and mentioned the new stores while Winnie entered the route mark. Good flour, he said. Dry, too, stacked by the bunkhouse. Winnie's charcoal stopped above sheet 7. Whose flour? Hugh answered from the doorway. The foreman's winter allotment. Joel entered behind him, carrying a coil of stiff rope. Snow had melted along the repaired seam of his right glove. Winnie looked only at him. Where did it come from? Joel could have said the sacks remained sealed. He could have explained the rider's hands, the cattle, the cold. He could have waited until the room emptied. I accepted custody from Hugh's storeroom, he said. I did not sign the endorsement. Winnie set down the charcoal. Accepted for whom? The cattle crew. From what inventory? Hugh's reserved stores. There are no reserved stores on these sheets. Hugh stepped farther inside, because those provisions were never assigned to household use. Winnie ran one finger down the flour column. 1 sack carries the base measure for every person here for more than 2 days. 6 sacks contain named portions, whether you write the names or not. Joel placed the rope on the floor. The riders need heavier food than the current supplement. Then make the case where everyone can see it. The count does not create more flour. Neither does moving flour behind another locked door. His voice lowered. If a rider loses strength and the herd breaks through ice, 31 people suffer. And if the women who mend him, feed him, dry his coat, tend the cows, and carry his kettle lose their share, the same herd fails more slowly. I know their work matters. You knew it before you took the key. The words landed without force and left no place to hide. Winnie pointed toward the bunkhouse. Bring the provisions into the public measure or return them, unopened. Hugh may refuse any future issue. Then we face that truth together. And if a man falls first, do not put his hunger into another person's empty bowl and call it protection. Hugh watched from the doorway with the patience of a man who believed disagreement itself would win for him. Winnie lifted sheet 7 from the board. Joel's name stood beside field fuel and crew supplements. She drew one line through it for the current week, not through prior sheets, not through work he had honestly counted before. Until the separate provisions are resolved, you do not witness a record affected by them. Joel's face went still. Understood. Winnie pinned the sheet back in place. She did not touch him. The absence carried more weight than anger. Hugh left the endorsement on the table and went out. Through the night, Joel sat in the bunkhouse office with copies of the household entries spread beneath one lamp. Mrs. Bell, shirts, blankets, feed sacks, breast straps. Agnes, preserve sorting, kitchen shifts, root counts. Mrs. Calder, milk, calf watch, cream, water hauled, wet coats dried, kindling split. Meals carried by hand after estate horses were barred. Joel had believed taking the provisions without signing Hugh's paper gave him time. Instead, he had accepted Hugh's first principle. Visible men could be fed before everyone who made their work possible. Near dawn, he woke Amos and the 2 hands who had moved the stores. They opened the bunkhouse shed together. Every flour tie remained intact. Both bean barrel bungs remained sealed. Amos checked each one before speaking. You returning them? Yes. Hugh will call us fools. He can count the seals himself. They loaded the flour and beans onto a hand sled. No estate horse could carry domestic food, and Joel would not use his private mare to make the return easier than the wrong choice had been. He took the front rope. Amos and the others pushed from behind. The runners cut deep through the packed snow. By the time they reached Hugh's storeroom, every man breathed hard in the cold. Hugh came from the office, while the first sack was lifted to the steps. "What are you doing?" "Returning what I should not have taken. Your crew will remember this when they are hungry." Amos wiped frost from his mustache. "We remember who carried our meals after the horses were withheld." Hugh ignored him and held out the endorsement. "Sign and the food stays." Joel did not take the paper. "No, you already accepted the allotment. I returned it unopened. Changing your mind does not make the first choice honorable. No, it makes the first choice wrong." Hugh's eyes narrowed. "You cannot lead men if a cook reverses your orders." "She showed me whose food I had agreed not to count. You are dismissed." The yard narrowed around the sentence. Hugh continued before anyone answered. "Effective after the February appraisal. Until then, you remain responsible for cattle work and immediate field safety. Afterward, Slate Hollow has no position for you." Joel looked toward the pasture, the cabins, and the south cookhouse chimney. "Trail work might come when roads opened. Freight work might not. Then that is the consequence." Hugh thrust the endorsement forward once more. "Last chance. I will not certify a lie, and I will not order my crew to empty those cabins." Winnie stood in the cookhouse doorway, holding sheet 7. Joel stopped several feet from her. "The provisions are back under Hugh's lock," he said. "Unopened. Amos and 2 hands witnessed them. I will enter the return. And my name? Not on this sheet." Payne crossed his face and went no farther. "Understood." Winnie recorded the separate delivery, the intact seals, the return, and the witnesses. The correction stood in the same public place as the wrong. On January 6th, Agnes ruled sheet 8 for the new week. A rider arrived from Buena Vista before noon, with the appraiser's instructions sealed inside his coat. The review remained set for February 2nd, weather permitting. Working records could be presented by their creator if direct counters were present. Proposed sale correspondence, cost projections, and copies held by the executor, buyer, or creditors were to be produced. Hugh read the letter twice before handing it to Joel. "There is still one way to save your position," he said. "Present the provision sheets as the foreman's records." Hugh's offer remained between them after the rider's horse had been led away. "Present the provision sheets as the foreman's records." The words promised Joel 2 things at once: a better chance the appraiser would read the figures, and a cleaner way for Hugh to erase the woman who had made them worth reading. Joel unfolded the letter again. The appraisal remained set for February 2nd, weather permitting. Working records could be presented by their creator if direct counters were available. Proposed sale correspondence, cost projections, and copies held by the executor, buyer, or creditors were to be produced. Hugh tapped the line about presentation. "A foreman's account will be heard. A cook's may be set aside as household notes." "Miss Dorsey built the sheets," Joel said. "You directed the ranch labor that made them possible. I entered only what I counted." "Then present them under your position and acknowledge her assistance if anyone asks." Joel folded the letter. "After they accept the records, after the estate." Hugh lowered his voice. "I can withdraw your dismissal. I can abandon the endorsement. You keep the cattle crew fit, the families. Keep their cabins until review, and no one outside Slate Hollow needs to argue over which name stood first on wrapping paper. She will know. Women in service often work under a man's account. That does not make the account true. Hugh glanced toward the south cookhouse. Truth is useful only if someone with standing can get it through the door. Joel did not answer there. He carried the letter across the yard, while wind drove loose snow along the path. Winnie was closing sheet 7. His name remained crossed from the witness column. Beneath it, she had entered the separate provisions, their intact seals, their return to Hugh's storeroom, and the names of Amos and the 2 hands who had seen every transfer. No part of the mistake had been hidden to make Joel easier to trust. He placed the appraisal letter beside her. Hugh offered to restore my position if I present the sheets as mine. Winnie finished the final edition before looking up. Are you considering it? I am considering what happens if the appraiser sees your name and decides not to read further. Because I am a cook, because you are a cook and a woman, and Hugh knows how to make both sound like disqualification. So your name would protect the figures. It might. And if the figures save the estate, I would tell the appraiser you created them, before or after he accepts them. Joel did not answer quickly enough. Winnie lifted the letter and read the final paragraph again. Proposed sale correspondence. Executor's cost projections. Copies held by the buyer or creditors. Hugh had shown no concern when the letter mentioned stores, labor, or housing. The sale papers had altered his face. He is not only afraid of my name, she said. He is afraid of what sits beside his figures. Joel followed her finger. I noticed. Did you know there was a buyer? Only that he spoke of liquidation before spring. Do you know who? No. Do you know what Hugh gains if it closes? No. Winnie returned the letter to the table. Then do not let him trade one unknown for another. Joel stood across from her, the work table between them. The distance was no longer punishment. It was a truth he had to cross honestly, or not at all. If the appraiser dismisses the sheets under your name, he said, Hugh may clear the cabins before anyone else hears the count. Then the appraiser will dismiss the truth in front of the people it fed. That is a hard risk for them. I am not asking them to risk themselves for my pride. I am asking you not to make me disappear to save work I created. The sentence struck deeper than Hugh's threat. Joel looked along the wall where the sheets hung in order. Winnie's charcoal, Agnes's store marks, Amos's fuel figures, his own entries only where he had earned the right to place them. Never ownership. You are right, he said. Winnie did not soften. About which part? If the records survive only after my name covers yours, Hugh wins even if the sale fails. And your position? Already lost. He offered it back, at your expense. Joel took the appraisal letter and crossed to the outer room, where Hugh waited as though the answer had always belonged to him. I will not present Miss Dorsey's records as mine. Hugh's expression barely moved. Then you may watch them rejected. I will verify field counts where my name appears. You will be unemployed by spring. Then anyone asking why may read what I sign next. Hugh's eyes narrowed. Conscience will not feed you. Neither will stealing her name. Joel returned to the work table and pulled a clean sheet from the stack Agnes kept beneath the flower wrapping. In plain language, he wrote that Winifred Dorsey had created the winter provision sheets and the winter compact, that every counter had signed only what he or she directly knew, that Joel Harwood had supplied field information, crew counts, route conditions, and fuel figures where his name appeared, and that the records should stand or fall under Winnie's authorship. He read the statement aloud before signing. Amos inspected the wording. You did not say she counted the cattle. Because she did not, Amos signed beneath the line confirming what he had personally counted. Agnes added her name for household stores, preservation, and route returns. Mrs. Bell made her mark beside mending and repair credits. Winnie checked each signature. No one claimed more knowledge than he possessed. Hugh watched the statement gain weight through the same discipline he had mocked. The appraiser will see loyalty, he said. He will see counters, Winnie replied. A rider left for Buena Vista before noon with Joel's statement inside an oilcloth packet. The same packet carried a copy of sheet 7's correction and a request that all proposed sale correspondence named in the appraisal notice be produced from every holder. Hugh followed the rider to the gate, but did not stop him. His fear appeared elsewhere. That afternoon, he moved the buyer file into the office cabinet, locked it, and kept the key on his own chain instead of leaving it on the estate ring. Winnie saw him from the cookhouse window. She did not name what she did not know. A clue spoken too soon could be hidden more deeply. By evening, Sheet 8 had been ruled for January 6th through January 12th. Winnie entered the opening stores, fuel measure, and resident count. 31. Joel's name did not return automatically. He came in after dark from the north pasture, shoulders white with frost, and stood near the provision board while she checked the first day's figures. The statement is on the road, he said. Yes, you do not owe me restoration. No, I will still answer every line I counted. I know. Winnie looked at sheet 7, then at the sealed sack return, the public confession, the job he had, accepted losing, and the name he had refused to take from her. The wrong choice remained visible. So did the correction made before outcome. She wrote Joel Harwood into sheet 8 beside field fuel and crew supplements, not above her name. Beside the other counters, Joel read the entry, as witness, as witness. Not because Hugh offered your name a lesser place, because you refused the offer before knowing whether my name would be enough. He nodded once. That is fair. You may ask one honest thing, Winnie said. Joel's breath slowed. The cookhouse had emptied, except for Agnes at the washbench, turned away and offering them the privacy of occupied hands. Joel did not step closer. May I kiss you? The question carried no claim on the restored signature, no reward demanded for losing his position, no assumption that trust had returned whole. Winnie lifted the dented ladle from the work table and hung it on its hook. Then she came around the bench. Joel waited. She placed her right hand against his jaw, feeling the cold roughness left by the day's wind. His eyes stayed on hers. Winnie closed the distance. The kiss was brief at first. Warm, deliberate, Joel answered, only after she leaned into him. One hand settling lightly at her waist without drawing her farther than she had chosen. No urgency overcame the care between them. When Winnie stepped back, he released her at once. Outside, a deep wooden groan rolled across the yard from the main storehouse. Amos opened the cookhouse door and looked toward the roofline. Middle brace, he said. Opened another finger at the joint. Wet snow had begun to cling to the shingles. Hugh had already refused sound timber for a building he expected to empty after appraisal. The review was 18 days away. The roof might not wait. The middle brace held through another week because everyone treated its groan as a warning instead of a surprise. From January 16th through the 28th, Amos checked the joint at dawn and dusk. Joel added temporary shoring where the floor could carry it. Hugh refused sound timber for a full repair. Sheet 9 closed on January 19th. Sheet 10 closed on the 26th. Sheet 11 began the next morning with 31 names, the same public measures, and a new line for the hours lost watching a roof that should already have been mended. On January 29th, the air softened just enough to make danger heavier. Snow that had lain dry across the storehouse roof began taking water into itself. By the 31st, wet flakes struck the shingles and stayed. The western slope sagged lower than it had the night before. Winnie stood inside the main storehouse beneath the sound eastern bay, counting what could be moved without putting anyone beneath the failing section. Human food, fuel, root sacks, dry storage cloth. Hugh entered through the side door with snow across his shoulders. "The oats first," he said, "then tack. The cattle operation carries the estate." Winnie marked a flour sack with blue chalk. People carry the cattle operation. If the teams weaken, no one leaves this ranch. If the food is buried, no one reaches spring. Hugh pointed toward the harness racks. Good tack can be sold. Damaged roots cannot. The roots can be eaten. A bridle cannot. A crack sounded overhead, small but sharp. Everyone inside stopped. Joel came from the western doorway and studied the roofline without stepping beneath it. "No one works alone from here forward," he said. 2 people enter. 2 people leave. 1 stays where the doorway remains visible. Hugh's cane struck the floor. "You are still foreman until appraisal. Then that is the safety order." He turned to Winnie. "What moves first? Not what do you want me to move? Not stand aside." The question gave her the work she had already measured. Winnie took the colored strips from the lantern kettle board. Blue takes food to the cookhouse. Red takes fuel to the lean-to. White moves roots into the south cellar. Yellow takes dry sacks and blankets. Green stands at each door and counts pairs in and out. Amos tied green around his sleeve. Agnes took white. Joel accepted blue. "No one changes color without reporting," Winnie said. "No one crosses under the western beam. If the roof drops another inch, all work stops." "The oats?" Hugh demanded. "East Bay after the human food clears," Winnie said. "The tack after that. You have no authority over estate stores. Then give your own order and sign beside the consequence." Hugh did not. The first teams began. 2 people entered. 2 people emerged. Every sack received a chalk mark at departure and a second at destination. Winnie stood in the open yard where she could see both doors and the south cookhouse. Her dented ladle hung unused inside that kitchen. For once, the measure that mattered was not a bowl. It was a body passing safely through a doorway. Blue moved flour, beans, salt, and rendered fat. White brought potatoes and turnips from the coldest bins. Red cleared split fuel and kindling. Yellow carried empty grain sacks, drying cloth, blankets, and the wrapping needed to protect stores if the weather worsened. The western roof settled another fraction. Snow slid from one edge in a heavy sheet. "Stop west door," Joel called. "East only." A young ranch hand named Eli had already crossed the yard with his partner when he remembered a small sack of coffee near the western post. "Leave it," Amos said. Eli looked once toward Hugh, who was standing beside the tack racks. Then he slipped through the side opening alone. "Green is missing one," Winnie said. Joel turned. "Ellie." The boy emerged just as a loose board broke from above. It struck the brim of his hat and sent him to one knee. Joel reached him first, but did not drag him upright. "Can you hear me?" "Yes." "Stay down." A shallow cut bled along the hairline where the hat had shifted. Agnes pressed clean folded cloth against it. "No fainting?" she asked. "No." "Sick to your stomach?" "No." "Then you will sit, answer when spoken to, and touch nothing heavier than a spoon." Hugh looked at the coffee sack in Eli's hand. At least he brought it. Winnie took the sack and placed it on the snow. It was not worth his skull. She entered the injury on sheet 11 before the blood had dried. Rule broken. Object retrieved. Injury incurred. Light duty ordered. No account softened because the person responsible felt ashamed. Eli remained awake near the cookhouse stove under Agnes's watch. The rescue continued with stricter pairs. By dusk, the human stores were clear. Fuel followed. The root bins were moved. Oats from the Sound Eastern Bay came last, before the best tack. Hugh objected until the roof gave a deep, rolling groan that silenced every argument. "Out," Joel said. No one reached for another sack. Amos called the colors: blue clear, red clear, white clear, yellow clear, green clear. Winnie counted the final pair through the east door. 31 residents remained accounted for across the ranch. No one stood beneath the failing roof. The western section collapsed less than a minute later. Shingles, wet snow, and split timbers came down over the empty bay. The sound drove horses against their stall chains and sent a cloud of old dust through the doorway. Hugh stared at the wreckage. Beneath it lay the tack he had wanted first, and the coffee sack Winnie had left in the snow. Not one person. By lantern light, Winnie gathered the records from the cookhouse wall, 10 completed sheets. Sheet 11 current through February 2nd. She wrapped them in oilcloth, tied the packet twice, and placed it on the raised desk beyond any meltwater tracked across the floor. The winter compact, route cards, returned seals, barter copies, and Joel's authorship statement went beside it, each separate and named. No one would search fallen timber for proof that had already survived. Morning on February 1st brought hard cold behind the wet storm. The road from Buena Vista remained buried in places, but near afternoon a hired sleigh appeared between the cottonwoods. 3 men rode beneath heavy robes. The first introduced himself as the court-appointed estate appraiser. The second represented Slate Hollow's principal creditor and carried a leather portfolio strapped under his coat. The third was Edwin Hale, named in county papers as special custodian should the court's preservation conditions be met. Hugh met them before the sleigh stopped moving. The main storehouse suffered weather damage, he said, an unfortunate event during ordinary winter operations. The appraiser looked past him at the collapsed roof and the marked lanes between the storehouse and cookhouse. Ordinary operations rarely color-code the snow. Winnie stood at the south cookhouse door with sheet 11 open on the desk behind her. The creditor's representative removed his portfolio only after entering the warm room. "These are copies from our financing and debt adjustment file," he said. The buyer's agent supplied proposed sale correspondence when requesting approval of the terms. Hugh's attention fixed on the portfolio. He did not ask which correspondence. That told Winnie more than a question would have. She still did not know the answer. The appraiser produced a sealed document bearing the county clerk's certification. Edwin Hale showed his commission separately. "This order remains contingent until findings are made," the appraiser said. "If inspection establishes threatened records, dangerous waste, non-emergency removal, or an undisclosed conflict affecting estate preservation, Mr. Hale may take temporary custody of operational keys, ledgers, and sale papers. He may suspend non-emergency sale or removal, preserve occupied housing and ordinary provisions, and maintain the present condition until hearing." Hugh's face tightened. "I remain executor." "Unless the court later orders otherwise," Hale said. "This does not remove you tonight." Then, The estate team will move my office trunks to the ranch house before dark. Joel stood beside the stable path. The team is hauling salvaged oats under the roof order. Those trunks contain estate property. Then they remain where the appraiser can inspect them. Hugh turned to the appraiser. He is a dismissed foreman. Effective after review, Joel said. The appraiser watched the exchange, then looked toward Winnie. Who directed the store removal? I directed the order of goods, she said. Joel directed physical safety. Amos counted pairs. Agnes handled the injured hand. And the records? Mine, with direct counters beside each line they know. The appraiser asked to see the system before seeing Hugh's projection. Winnie showed him the color marks, the destination tallies, the storehouse transfer lines, and the injury entry. She did not make a speech. The marks already described the collapse before it happened. By nightfall, the final salvaged sack reached dry cover. Winnie stood beside the red rootstack while Joel set it down. His repaired glove was wet across the palm. She reached for his hand. Their fingers closed once, firmly, in the space between completed work and whatever judgment morning would bring. Joel did not pull her nearer. Winnie did not let go until she had chosen to. At midnight, before Hugh, Winnie, Joel, Agnes, Amos, the creditor's representative, and the appraiser, the county seal was broken. The full preservation authority was read aloud. Edwin Hale placed the unopened order beside the oilcloth folio after signing that he had received it. No keys changed hands yet. No findings had been entered. The appraiser set Hugh's 19-man projection on one side of the raised desk and Winnie's 11-week record on the other. At first light, he said, we determine which account describes the estate that is actually here. At first light, the appraiser set Hugh's 19-man projection beside sheet 1 and asked a question no one in the room could answer without choosing which estate they meant. How many people did Slate Hollow support on November 17th? Hugh stood at the raised desk in the South Cookhouse with his cost schedule open before him. 19 necessary wage hands. Winnie untied the oilcloth folio. 31 residents. She laid sheet 1 flat. 31 names. 31 portions. 31 bodies Hugh's projection had reduced to expense before anyone outside the ranch could see them. The appraiser touched the current sheet. This one? Sheet 11, Winnie said, January 27th through February 2nd. It remains open through tonight. And the others? 10 completed weekly sheets in order. Hugh opened his own ledger. Kitchen counts are not estate accounts. They do not distinguish dependents from productive labor. They distinguish what was issued, who received it, what work affected the issue, and who directly counted each line, Winnie said. Nothing more. Nothing more, Hugh repeated. You have treated domestic habit as economic proof. Then test it. The appraiser did. He began with Agnes Finch, not because Hugh considered her important, but because the stores could be touched. Agnes led him to the south root cellar and named what had been sound, what had spoiled, and what had been moved before the storehouse roof fell. He chose crocks and bins without warning. The quantities matched her entries closely enough that he stopped looking for invention and began looking for method. Who reduced the spoilage? He asked. The people whose work Mr. Vickery did not enter, Agnes said. I counted it because Miss Dorsey required a name beside every claim. Hugh objected. Mrs. Finch is defending her lodging. The appraiser examined a turnip cut clean through the center. She is also showing me stores your summary omitted. The second verification belonged to Amos Pike. He brought the repaired breast strap, fuel tallies, and the returned root seals. "I thought this was kitchen foolishness," he said. "Then the dry wood was sold, and we had to make green stock burn. Then the horse order came, and people carried food on foot. Then Mrs. Bell fixed this strap before the West crew lost another half day." "How many cattle were preserved by one strap?" Hugh asked. "That is not a measure anyone can honestly give," Amos said. "But I can give the hours we did not lose, the feed we moved, and the men who ate hot food before riding again." The appraiser checked Amos's entries against crew assignments in Joel's field book. The figures did not match perfectly. They overlapped where they should. That made them stronger. A rehearsed lie would have been cleaner. The third verification belonged to Joel. He stood without his hat, the repaired seam of his right glove visible where his hand rested near the table. "Did you sign the original reduction recommendation?" the appraiser asked. "Yes." "Did you sign the attached schedule?" "No." Hugh shifted. The attachment applied his judgment under executor authority. Joel did not turn toward him. "My words made that application easier. I did not name December 31st. I did not order family cabins cleared. I did not direct the sale of kitchen stock or draft teams. But I advised reducing seasonal payroll and attached housing, expense without counting the labor housed there." "Did you later retract the recommendation?" "Yes." Before this appraisal, the retraction reached Buena Vista in December. "Did you accept private provisions from Mr. Vickery? 6 flour sacks and 2 bean barrels for the cattle crew. Were they opened?" "No." "Why did you return them?" "Because taking them outside the public count accepted, the same false division I claimed to oppose." Hugh gave a short, disbelieving breath. The cattle crew required supplements. "They received supplements," Winnie said, "entered publicly." The appraiser raised a hand. "Let him finish." Joel's voice remained level. "I accepted custody. Miss Dorsey's removed me from the current witness column. I returned every sealed provision before I knew whether doing so would save my position. Mr. Vickery dismissed me effective after appraisal. And the sheets? Winifred Dorsey created them. I contributed only field, fuel, crew, and route information I directly knew. Would the appraiser have taken them more seriously under your name? Mr. Vickery believed so. Did he offer to restore your position if you presented them as yours? Yes. Did you refuse? Yes. Hugh closed his ledger. A dismissed employee's testimony is hardly neutral. Joel finally faced him. No, it is accountable. The appraiser spent the rest of February 2nd walking Slate Hollow. He inspected the failed brace, the temporary shoring, the roof section that had collapsed, the stores moved by color, the cabins Hugh had marked for clearance, the milk cows, the route distances, and the fuel stack. On February 3rd, he compared Hugh's liquidation projection with the winter costs actually incurred. On February 4th, he reviewed sale papers from both Hugh's cabinet and the creditor's portfolio. Edwin Hale remained present, but touched no key. The preservation order had not yet been activated. Hugh was still executor. His authority narrowed only when evidence justified it. The decisive paper came from the creditor's debt adjustment file. The representative placed a duplicate agreement on the cookhouse desk. The buyer's agent supplied this copy when requesting creditor approval for the proposed sale terms. Hugh's face lost color before the seal was broken. Winnie noticed. She did not guess aloud. The appraiser read the agreement once to himself, then again before the witnesses. If the proposed sale closed before spring, Hugh Vickery would receive a brokerage payment from the buyer. The room did not erupt. The truth needed no crowd to enlarge it. Hugh placed both hands on the desk. The estate required speed. The fee compensated negotiation and responsibility. Was the compensation disclosed to the county court? The appraiser asked. It was contingent. Was it disclosed to the heirs? The sale was not complete. Was it included in the cost projection you submitted for emergency liquidation? Hugh did not answer. The agreement did not prove theft. It did prove that the man arguing delay would destroy the estate stood to gain personally if the sale closed before spring. Debt pressure had been real. So was the conflict. On February 5th, the appraiser read his written findings in the South Cookhouse. Emergency liquidation had not been shown necessary. Hugh's projection omitted usable stores, household labor, avoided expense, and operating value. The delayed repair of the storehouse brace had endangered property, records, and people. The brokerage interest had not been disclosed. The winter provision sheets, winter compact, root seals, barter agreements, and direct counter testimony described the estate's actual winter operation more accurately than Hugh's 19-man projection. The records are accepted under the name of their creator, the appraiser said. Winifred Dorsey. Winnie did not lower her head. She had not spent 11 weeks making people visible so she could disappear when her own name was spoken. Hugh remained executor pending a county hearing. The appraiser had no authority to remove him permanently. Edwin Hale did have authority to preserve what Hugh's conduct had placed at risk. Hale opened the order and read each action before taking it. He received the office key, storehouse key, record cupboard key, estate ledgers, buyer correspondence, and sale papers. He suspended non-emergency sale and removal. Occupied housing remained in use. Ordinary rations issued under the posted system were treated as estate preservation expense, not debts charged later against the families. No kitchen livestock or draft team could be sold before further court direction. Hugh handed over the keys one at a time. This is not a finding that I stole from the estate. No, Hale said. It is a finding that you may not control the evidence or the operation alone while the court decides the rest. The distinction preserved truth without softening consequence. By late afternoon, the witnesses had gone back to their work. Hugh had crossed to the ranch house under Hale's supervision. Winnie stood beneath the cookhouse eaves, where meltwater struck the packed snow in dark drops. Joel came from the barn, carrying no paper and offering no claim on what had happened. They used your name, he said. They used the record. Both matter. Yes. He stopped an arm's length away. I am glad. Winnie studied the man who had first counted only riders and cattle, then returned food he should not have taken, surrendered his position, and testified to every fact that made him look less honorable before correction. Do not mistake this for payment, she said. I won't. She caught the front of his coat and pulled him down. The kiss was not the cautious question from January. It carried relief, anger spent honestly, and desire no longer forced to hide behind work. Joel did not close his arms around her until she drew him nearer a second time. Then one hand settled at her back, firm enough to answer and loose enough to release. Winnie chose the length of it. When she stepped away, he let her go. The creditor's representative appeared at the cookhouse door with 2 sealed packets beneath his arm. Miss Dorsey, Mr. Hale. He waited until Hale joined them. The residuary heirs left contingent instructions in case the working system was validated. The county judge has also issued supplemental authority permitting the special custodian to negotiate a 1-year provisions contract as an estate preservation expense. Winnie took neither packet before hearing the whole sentence. "Negotiate," she said, "not assign." The representative inclined his head. Negotiate. For the first time since the wagon left her at Slate Hollow, the next decision about her labor would begin with her terms. Winnie did not open the contract packet until Edwin Hale placed the county clerk's certification beside it on the cookhouse table. February 6th had begun with a hard blue dawn. Sheet 12 already, 3 days open, and Hugh Vickery watching from the ranch house window as authority passed around him. Without disappearing into another man's pocket, the creditor's representative broke the first seal. Hale broke the second. The county judge's supplemental order authorized the special custodian to employ whatever provisions management was reasonably necessary to preserve Slate Hollow for 1 year, subject to later court review, the creditor's written lack of objection, and the residuary heir's consent. The authority belonged to Hale. The terms did not. "The heirs propose that you remain as cook," the representative said. Winnie kept her hands off the paper. "Then the proposal is already too small." Hale sat across from her with an empty sheet and a sharpened pencil. "Name the work: provisioning, inventory, preservation, fuel use, route planning, barter, hiring inside the kitchen budget, weekly public accounts. You want authority over ranch labor? No, I want authority over kitchen labor and the right to request field assistance through whoever commands the crew. Joel's authority stays in the field. Mine stays here." Joel stood near the stove, present only because Hale had asked him to verify operational boundaries. He said nothing. That silence mattered. Hugh would have used his presence to suggest the contract came through him. Joel refused even that shadow. Hale wrote the heading, "Provisions Manager." "Wages?" he asked. Winnie named a fixed monthly amount based on the work already performed, not on what Hugh had first offered a cook. The creditor's representative drew breath through his nose. "That is above ordinary kitchen service. Then hire ordinary kitchen service and let it answer for 31 people. Barter agreements, route evidence, fuel control, winter stores, and the appraiser's accepted records." No one reduced the figure. "Quarters?" Hale asked. "My choice between the service room and the garden cottage once it is made weathertight. The cottage needs a roof patch. Then it is not presently a choice." Hale entered repair before occupancy. Winnie continued. "No private ration for executor, foreman, creditor, heir, or provisions manager. Any supplement receives a reason and a direct counter. Agreed. 1 new sheet each week, posted where the people named may read it. Agreed. Household labor and ranch labor entered under the same standard. No one signs what they did not count." Hale nodded. Agreed. Wood and horse use allocated by a posted measure, not favor. The creditor's representative glanced at the horse clause. Estate teams remain valuable property. So are people carrying hot kettles 6 miles because one man can lock a stable. Hale added that route horses could be assigned for ordinary provisions when weather, distance, or safety required, with use entered publicly. Winnie waited until the wording was read back. "I hire within the approved kitchen wage limit." "With the custodian's knowledge," Hale said. "With the custodian receiving the names and wages, not choosing them," he considered, then entered it. "Rest?" he asked. The question caught her harder than the wage. At the mining boarding house, rest had meant losing a shift, and perhaps the bed attached to it. At Slate Hollow, every crisis had rewarded the same dangerous belief. If she stopped moving, someone would go hungry. 1 afternoon each week, she said, when no immediate danger prevents it. Hale began to write the condition. Winnie stopped him. No. The danger must be named and entered. Otherwise, every ordinary shortage becomes an emergency and the afternoon disappears. Hale looked up. 1 rest afternoon weekly. Any postponement requires a recorded reason and another afternoon within 7 days. Yes. Anything else? The room held Joel's steady presence, but Winnie did not turn toward him. No marriage condition. No shared residence condition. No male guarantor. The contract remains mine if I marry. Court, refuse either, or live alone. The representative's brows rose. Hale wrote every word. Joel did not smile. He understood that approval from him would have weakened the point. When the draft was complete, Winnie read it twice. The creditor's representative signed only the no objection and heir's consent. Hale signed for the estate under the county order. Winnie signed for herself. Joel signed nothing. Hale sanded the ink, folded 1 copy for the estate, and gave 1 to Winnie. She placed hers in the locked drawer beneath the raised desk. For the first time since the wagon left her at Slate Hollow, her right to remain did not depend on Hugh's pleasure, Joel's protection, or a kitchen fire she could keep alive by refusing to sleep. It rested beneath her own name. The system changed slowly enough to be trusted. Agnes took full responsibility for the root cellar entries on sheet 12. Mrs. Bell counted fuel bundles and mending credits. Amos checked crew supplements against actual field work instead of accepting every request from a tired rider. Eli, the young hand struck by the falling board, remained on light duty until the wound closed cleanly. When he returned to the blue route, he carried nothing heavier than the marked card and 1 empty kettle. Sheet 12 closed on February 9th. Sheet 13 followed, then 14. The kitchen did not become easier because authority had changed hands. Snow still blocked the west fence. 2 sacks of potatoes softened near the cellar wall and had to be sorted before rot spread. 1 milk cow stopped producing for 3 days. The difference was that no emergency could now be hidden inside a private order. Fuel, loss, labor, and delay received lines. So did recovery. On Winnie's first rest afternoon, she walked to the garden cottage with no basket on her arm. Hale had patched the roof and fitted oiled cloth behind the cracked west window until glass could come from Buena Vista. The room held 1 iron bedstead, a small stove, and a chair facing the bare garden rows. Winnie sat. At first she counted sounds. The cookhouse door, the pump handle, a kettle lid. Amos calling a route. Her body waited for someone to come running. No one did. Agnes closed the noon count. Mrs. Bell corrected a fuel mark. Amos refused a second supplement until the rider named the work that required it. The system held because Winnie had taught people to carry truth, not because she stood over every bowl. Joel knocked once at the cottage door near dusk. He remained outside when she opened it. Did the kitchen survive? He asked. Barely. Agnes used a spoon without me. A reckless woman. Winnie leaned against the doorframe. Hale spoke with you? He did. About staying? Through calving, perhaps. After that, the successor administration may offer a seasonal foreman contract, or I may take trail work. Freight, if the roads open early. He did not say what he hoped she would choose. Will you go? She asked. I do not know. Do you expect me to wait? No. To follow? No. To leave this contract if you find work elsewhere? No. The answers came without injury, disguised as nobility. What do you want? She asked. Joel rested 1 hand against the porch post. To earn the right to ask what you want again when the road opens. Winnie let him stand with that, then ask later. He did. Through February, Affection lived inside ordinary restraint. Joel brought route reports to the desk and left space for Winnie to read them. She repaired the same glove when the old seam pulled loose again, but neither treated the touch as a new beginning. Once, after a late red route return, he warmed her hands between his only after she offered them. No kiss replaced the work they still owed the winter. By February 27th, sheet 15 was 4 days old. The line marked road opened remained blank. Snow had softened at noon and frozen again by sunset, turning the path between cookhouse and barn into a dark, shining ribbon. Joel returned from the green route on foot, the kettle empty, the steel tied to its handle. His private bay mare had not been needed. The route had gone by hand sled under the posted measure. Winnie entered the return. 31 portions delivered. No delay, no injury. "You have asked me what I want more than once," Joel said. Agnes had gone to the cellar. The cookhouse stood warm, but not private enough to make the words feel stolen from the life around them. "Yes, I know part of my answer." Winnie hung the green seal beside the others. Joel did not move closer. "I love you when you are feeding 31 people, he said. "I love you when you put down the ladle and tell me no. I love you when your work stands without me in the room." The confession did not offer shelter, wages, or rescue. It named what already existed. Winnie crossed the space between them. "I love you because you returned what should never have been yours to take." Joel's breath left slowly. "That is not the easiest reason a man could hope for. It is the truest." She placed her hands against his coat. "I will court you after winter. Openly, openly. Engaged when the road opens. No. You leave if I take work elsewhere? No. You expect me to stay if my work takes me elsewhere? No." Joel's hands settled at her waist only after she leaned into him. "Then what are we promising? To ask. To answer honestly. To choose again when the answer costs something." He bent toward her, but Winnie closed the final distance. The kiss held longer than the first and carried none of the desperate relief from the appraisal. This was steadier. Chosen with the future still uncertain. When they parted, Joel rested his forehead against hers, only after she remained close. Winnie did not erase the blank line on sheet 15. Love had been spoken. The road was not yet open. The line marked road opened remained blank through the last day of February. Snow softened under the noon sun, then hardened after dark into ridges that caught boots and sled runners alike. Slate Hollow still held 31 people. No cabin stood empty. No one mistook survival for abundance. The herd had come through the worst cold, but it was smaller than Hugh's first autumn tally, and spring sales would still be needed to meet debt. The difference was no longer whether the estate had hardship. It was whether hardship would be used to erase the people carrying it. Sheet 15 closed on March 2nd. Winnie entered the final figures, read them aloud, and placed the completed page beneath the others in the oilcloth folio. Sheet 16 began the next morning. Partial week. Final winter count. By March 4th, the western route had opened enough for what Winnie expected to be the last full lantern kettle relay. Blue, red, white, yellow and green strips hung from their hooks above the route board. The colors had faded from steam and handling, but every one could still be named at a glance. Joel came to the South cookhouse. Before dawn, wearing the right glove, Winnie had repaired twice. His private bay mare waited outside, saddled for the green route under the same public rule that governed every provisions horse. The use was entered before he took the reins. No favor, no hidden allocation. Winnie handed Amos the blue card, Mrs. Bell the red, and Agnes the white. Yellow went by hand sled to the dairy shed. Joel opened his gloved palm for Green. Winnie laid the strip across it and closed his fingers around the seal. South fence, she said. Marked draw. No creek shortcut. Turn back if the west ridge disappears, and bring the seal home. And the kettle. Their eyes held long enough to remember the first time she had given him the same route. Then Joel went. Blue returned before noon. Yellow followed with a note that the heifer was heavy with calf but sound. White came back carrying an empty kettle and 2 additional jars of spoiled roots for the lost column. Red arrived near dusk. Green did not. Winnie kept the stove at service heat. She sent no second party into the dark. The old fear still came, but it no longer ruled the room. A route had been chosen. A horse had been entered. A man had promised to turn back when the land required it. Trust did not mean imagining danger away. It meant refusing to create more danger because waiting hurt. Hoofbeats reached the yard after supper. Joel led the bay mare the final distance, one hand on the reins and the green kettle hanging from the saddle horn. Snow had crusted along the horse's lower legs. "What happened?" Winnie asked when he entered. The western drift broke under her. "No injury. I walked the last mile to spare the leg." He placed the empty kettle on the table and opened his hand. The green seal lay inside. Returned. Winnie took it, then kept his hand. The gesture was neither urgent nor uncertain now. Joel's fingers closed around hers. "You stayed out of the creek?" she asked. "I stayed where I said I would." She lifted their joined hands once, as though entering the answer into a ledger only they could see. Joel bent and kissed her temple. Brief warmth against cold skin. No one in the cookhouse turned away or stared. Affection had become part of the ordinary life they had earned. On March 7th, a wagon appeared on the Buena Vista Road, carrying fresh flour, lamp oil, mail, 2 panes of glass, and a driver who cursed every mile behind him. The road was open, he said, though only a fool would call it good. Winnie laughed once before she could stop herself. Then she opened sheet 16. Beneath the final day, she wrote, "Road opened March 7th. All households fed." Agnes read the line over her shoulder. Amos counted 31 bowls for the evening meal. Fresh flour did not become a feast. Winnie made thick biscuits to go with beans and preserved onions. Every person received the same base measure. Heavy work supplements were entered where earned. The last winter kettle returned before dark. After service, Winnie closed sheet 16 and carried the oilcloth folio to the records cupboard above the raised desk. 16 sheets lay inside in order, from the first 31 portions to the open road. The compact, barter agreements, route records, returned seals, authorship statement, retraction, and appraisal findings occupied separate labeled bundles. Nothing had to be remembered by kindness alone. Late spring did not make Slate Hollow wealthy. It made the truth harder to undo. At the county hearing, Hugh Vickery was removed from estate administration for failing to disclose his brokerage interest and for mismanaging property under winter risk. The proposed sale had not closed before spring, and the brokerage payment was disallowed. No one accused him of a crime the evidence did not prove. A successor executor continued an ordinary spring sale under county supervision, with Edwin Hale turning over keys and records by written receipt. Emergency liquidation never resumed. No household received a retroactive bill for winter rations. The ranch kept fewer cattle, sold selected stock, and paid part of what it owed. Agnes Finch became senior kitchen worker under Winnie's budget. Mrs. Bell kept the fuel count and repair ledger. Amos checked crew supplements before bringing them to the desk. Eli's scalp wound healed, though Agnes continued to remind him that coffee was still not worth his skull. The kitchen ran when Winnie stood in it. More important, it ran when she did not. Joel received a separate seasonal foreman offer from the successor executor. Field authority was written plainly. Kitchen authority was excluded. Provisions horses were assigned by posted rule. Before he signed, he brought the paper to Winnie at the garden cottage. "I am not asking permission," he said. "Good. I am showing you the terms before I bind myself to them." Winnie read every line. "Then sign the man you mean to be." He did. On her next rest afternoon, Joel brought supper in a covered tin and stopped outside the cottage threshold. The western window now held new glass. Beyond it, dark garden rows waited for seed. "May I come in?" he asked. Winnie opened the door wider. "You may sit on the porch. Cold welcome. Warm supper." He accepted the chair she offered and no more. Later, they walked back toward the south cookhouse. 31 clean bowls stood stacked beside the wash basin. The last winter kettle hung drying. Winnie lifted the dented copper ladle, its plain applewood handle smooth from use, and placed it on the hook above the serving hatch. The dents remained, so did the measure. Joel waited outside the cookhouse door instead of stepping across the threshold before her. When Winnie came out, he offered his hand. Not a command, not a rescue, a choice. She placed her hand in his, and together they walked toward the dark garden rows while the kitchen behind them stayed warm, open, and full of names.